I suppose the two most interesting things that I discovered in my research were, first of all, the whole phenomenon of the two-sidedness of women's migration for care work. I'm looking at the recent development of this trend for women to be migrating from poorer countries to richer countries to become caregivers. And this is not an entirely new phenomenon because, of course, women have been migrating to become domestic servants or domestic workers for a long time. But I think only recently we've realized how much care work, how important care work was in that whole phenomenon. I mean, women who were maids have always taken care of children, they've taken care of elders and so forth. But now we realize, I mean, now people are migrating specifically to become care workers. And I think, so one of the things that I discovered was that that these are women, they're not young single women, they're often women who've been married or they're middle-aged women, and they have dependents of their own. They're leaving behind children or elders or other family members who also need care, and they're trying to figure out how to do that caring across borders to become transnational mothers, as the phrase goes. And they use all kinds of different devices to do that, whether it's emailing or Skyping or telephone calls or whatever. And it's, you know, it's very difficult, and it has proven to be quite alienating for a lot of people. I mean, I think the jury is still out in terms of the impact of this whole process. But when the absence goes on for a long time, when it goes over many years and parents and children don't see each other for a long time, it has a real psychological effect on the children and on the parents, and especially on the mothers. And so that makes it very difficult. So that's one thing I discovered, I think, is that just the depth of that, the complexity of those relationships, and the ways in which women try to cope with them. And of course, the irony is that while these women are separated from their own children, from their own loved ones, they're supposed to be caring in a loving way for the children or the elders or whoever, their employers. And they're supposed to keep up a good front. You know, they're supposed to be cheerful all the time that they're doing this, even while they may be missing their own family members a great deal. So it's a very poignant kind of work, kind of employment. I think it's an unusual occupation in that way. And the other thing I discovered in looking at transnational organizations, international organizations like the ILO, like the UN, like, you know, and various NGOs, is the extent to which they are or mostly are not taking this into consideration. It's just not a theme in international politics. A lot of scholars are studying it and talking about it, and a certain number of activists are beginning to talk about it and trying to do something about it. But the international organizations themselves have not really taken this up as a theme. And I don't know whether it's because it's emotional, it's a somewhat amorphous phenomenon, they don't have the language for it, it seems inappropriate, or whatever, but it's just not really on the policy agenda very much. So for example, with when the ILO recently passed the Convention on Decent Work for Domestic Workers, I don't think this particular aspect of it was really part of the discussion, and I think that's for two reasons. One is because the migration part of it. I mean, in order to understand the emotional part of it, you have to understand the migration part of it. That has to be a major component of it. The understanding that people are leaving their homes in order to take this kind of work, and understanding that sometimes it involves great distances, long periods of time, and of course it's complicated by the immigration regulations and laws of particular countries, to the extent to which it's easy for women to get in, the extent to which it's easy for them to go home again. You know, if you're in a situation where there's circular migration and people are going back and forth fairly regularly, that's less difficult than situations where women are migrating over long distances. That makes it very expensive to go home. It may be hard for them to get back because of immigration and so forth. So I would say those are the two things that I've discovered, and they're obviously closely related to one another, and I think we have to unpack them in order to understand them analytically, but then we have to put them back together again in order to make some change, in order to bring about some reform, that somehow or other the language of the scholar's language, the scholar's understanding, and the activist language and the activist perspective somehow or other have to get translated into a policy agenda and hopefully into some kind of reform at some point in the near future, because this problem is not going away. Women are staying in the labor force. They're going to need they're going to need caregivers for their children. Population aging is going on at a rapid pace, and the number of elders who need care is going to only increase, not only in the rich countries, but also in the developing world too. I mean, fortunately, mortality's going up, or not mortality's going, not the rates of mortality, but population aging is going on. But that means there are more and more elders who need care, and how are they going to be cared for? So it's a complicated issue.